Do you fully comprehend all that goes into writing a book? Hi, this is Carma Spence, and in today's episode of the Weekday Wisdom, we pick up where we left off with me interviewing Joan Gelfand. And today we're going to talk a little bit about all the things that go into writing a book. Because writing a book is more than just sitting down and writing a book. It's more than the craft of writing. It's also more than the marketing of the book, which you also have to do. So there's the craft, there's the business, and then there's all this other stuff that makes those two things happen and work together. That's what we're going to talk about in today's episode of the Weekday Wisdom with my interview with Joan Gelfand. So what inspired you to write this nonfiction book if you started off with novels?
Well, it kind of kept haunting me, that I wanted to bring to writers my business background, because in the book, there's some memoir aspects to this book. And I talk about how I had worked in the business world for over 20 years. Well, in the business world, you can't get paid unless you do some certain, let's just say, activities or use certain tools to make sure that you're going to succeed. And I happen to be in sales. So in sales, you really don't get paid if you don't do the right things. So you start to learn how to develop certain life disciplines, I guess, to get a project from point A to point B. And I felt like when I went out into the art world and I met writers, they didn't know the first thing about, these very basic elements, like you start a project, you set your own deadlines, you commit to finishing that project. That's, point one, right?
Right.
You take it out in the world. I mean, people just were overwhelmed just by doing a reading and submitting to a magazine, Right. And so I kind of wanted to break it down and make it, as we used to say in the business world, when you have an elephant, how do you deal with this? And, you cut it into small pieces.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I wanted to do, because I think that the idea of people, they want to write, but then how do I get published? They just kind of, it's like this gap, and I just want to say, there's actually a roadmap. They didn't teach it to me in my BA. Mm-hmm. They didn't teach it to me in my MFA, but I figured it out. And what's interesting, I'm not going to go too tangential, but just say there are a lot of books on the market on the business of writing, because
Exactly.
People are starting to realize, writers need to bone up on their skills. But there's no book that's saying it's both, spiritual is too strong of a word, but mm-hmm. It's this confidence on top of this commitment, on top of building community, that, definitely craft is not just enough. There's a lot of very highly educated, very good writers out there. In the introduction, I actually call the book a holistic approach to becoming a published writer, because yes, there is the business of writing, and people and authors should be talking about it. And I think some of the authors that are out there talking about it as well as I do. But it's not just the business part too. It's the inner work that we have to do. How do I say this? It's like most of our writing is very close to the bone, very personal.
Yeah.
So you can teach someone the business aspects, but unless they're, really feeling like they have a good foundation, they're not going to want to take it out there either.
Right. And, that was one thing I mentioned in the intro, is that you have this sort of unique look, because if you think about it, there are plenty of books on crafts, on the craft of writing. I mean, I've got an entire bookshelf loaded. Yes. And that's just science fiction craft. And I've got another bookshelf that's like all more marketing and business craft. And then, of course, there's tons of books about how to market your book, how to become a freelance writer, how to get your work out there. But you're talking about two different things in addition to that, which are probably implied by those other books, but aren't actually addressed. So I thought it might be interesting if we kind of broke down and talked about each of the 4 C's and how you see it. So let's start with craft. What do you think are the best ways for someone to develop their crafts so that they can feel like they are good enough to get started on a long-term project like a book? We'll get to the answer to that question in next week's Weekday Wisdom. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube and let me know in a comment below. Remember, think outside the box, spread your wings and fly, because you are capable of more than you know. And that includes everything we just talked about with Joan.